Well, frustration is growing on the Fond du Lac Reservation tonight amid a search for a missing man.
Yeah, this is 31-year-old Peter Martin, reported missing earlier this month. Peter was last seen at his home on the Fond du Lac Reservation. After a month of searching by tribal police and family members, Peter's whereabouts remain a mystery to his community.
Well, now his loved ones are frustrated. More agencies are not joining the search. Northern News Now's Cara Kopp heard from them today.
A rally today outside Duluth's federal building held by the family of Peter Martin, a brother, cousin, uncle, and father who disappeared March 8th.
He loved that little girl. He loves his family. He wouldn't have just got up and left without telling someone where he was going.
He wasn't involved in gangs, drugs, alcohol, stuff like that. He's a good kid.
His family wants the FBI, whose offices are inside this building, to get involved in the search because they fear foul play may have led to his disappearance. And they say Fond du Lac PD is failing to treat Peter's case with urgency.
They're not handling this the proper way. They need actual law enforcement that knows how to handle something like this, and it's not Fond du Lac Police.
The family's criticism gaining the attention of Fond du Lac Band Chairman Kevin Dupuis, who issued a statement today saying, in part, we respect the decisions and approaches of our police department. Our thoughts and prayers remain with Peter's family and the community. Meanwhile, the Fond du Lac Band did activate an emergency operations center, which requires all divisions of the tribal nation to donate available resources to Peter's search. We also heard from the Minnesota BCA today, who plans to meet with the tribal leaders next week about the case. Martin's friends, family, and community hoping as many people and agencies as possible can get involved to help bring Peter home.
The people who are involved know who they are. They need to come forward and say something.
Bring my brother home.
In Duluth, Cara Kopp, Northern News Now.
Cara, thank you. Now, there is a $10,000 reward being offered by the community to help find Peter Martin. It was raised through a GoFundMe. We did reach out to the FBI today as well about their potential involvement in this investigation and did not hear back.